All right. So we're doing the book Slaughterhouse 5. So I'm Alex Kolev.
I'm Zane Press.
I'm Thomas Tusha.
I'm Robert Richmond.
And Brandon Torres.
All right. So first, before we get into anything like too detailed, I just want to say that this book is primarily an anti-war book. Like throughout history, war has been put as like glorified and as good and necessary, but this book says the complete opposite. War is not organized. War is not victorious. The war doesn't create peace. War is chaotic. It's unjust. It's absurd, and there's no organization at all.
And it's rather irrational what it does to a human's head. And, it's just not very practical in terms of like the way us humans should be programmed to do something in all actual essence of things.
And further on in the book, when we get deeper into this conversation, we'll learn what it's like when there is a population that is able to look past war and what the life is like without that.
Yeah, and I think everyone knows war in general is bad relatively, but no one really knows how bad it is for the individual that goes through it. So I think this really shows how much war desensitizes a human.
So for quick context, before the real Slaughterhouse 5 begins, we get a quick Chapter 1 kind of introduction to what we're about to read. So as we know, Billy Pilgrim is going to visit an old friend or prisoner of war, kind of comrade, you could say. And, he's just discussing the book that he's about to write with him and how he wants to write it because, he doesn't really want to justify war. And this is a promise that he makes to the man's wife. And, yeah, we just get an introduction that he's going to write this book, and he doesn't really know where to go with it. And then the book starts.
And then at first, when you start reading this book, especially me, it was pretty confusing because of the way it's structured. It's very
Scatterbrained.
Yeah, it's scattered, disorganized. It relies a lot on flashbacks.
And it's really in the point of view of a human who went through the experiences of Dresden and being a prisoner of war and being treated in such a way.
Yeah, I think it opens up with a very unique approach because instead of like how a normal story would open up with, the beginning to the end, you really have a clustered beginning that kind of narrates his thoughts and how he's going about trying to relive his moments through the war.
Right. You kind of put in a time place where you're expected to know what's going on, but when you get further into the book, you kind of realize, okay, so I was just in a different time period then. Now this is really the beginning of the book. And you see that throughout the entire story. It's basically like, time traveling. You get to jump around.
And it's very reminiscent of like a Quentin Tarantino film. and like it reminds me a lot of Pulp Fiction, especially whenever it's just like it's like a puzzle, figuring out specific points within a person's life and connecting them on a timeline outside of it. And I think that's super interesting that the writer was able to do something like that.
And building off of that, like the disorganization and how chaotic and scrambled the book can be sometimes, I feel like you can relate that to the message of war in this book as a whole. Like going back on what I said earlier, that war, there's no organization in war. There's no function in it. It's just super chaotic. You don't really know what's going on a lot of the times. And at the beginning of this book, that's how a reader can feel because of how the writer keeps going from the present to the past to the future, and I feel like that's just a way how he's coped with things.
And with the time changes also, like it relates to war, it can also relate to the mindsets and the post-traumatic war trauma that the war prisoners experienced.
Yeah, I'd say what Thomas is saying, I'd piggyback off that, saying that, for me, I think the time travel was a metaphor for the psychological effects of the trauma that war brings. And, some may look at it as sort of his superpower in the novel, but I think it's actually a negative thing that occurs because of all the trauma he's been through.
All right, so I'll lead us into talking about several characters in this book. So, me personally, one character that I think is essential to this book, and functions as a representative to the book and the message as a whole is
And the people that you meet within
Yeah.
war, and like what those people can do to you.
is Roland Weary. So Roland was like a really violent soldier who he was just insane. Like you can tell this guy's lost his mind, and like several acts that he's done throughout the book just shows that. Like one of the times he says how a dog bit him once and he shoved like razors. And
That guy. That's a different guy. Roland Weary.
Well, I'll talk about
oh, that's Lazaro.
No,
My
yeah.
bad. That's Lazaro.
Roland Weary, his family is like from the South, and they're obsessed with weapons and just all sorts of weapons, and it's just like him wanting to kill like everybody, and like these are just like the types of people that you meet in war, and it leaves you in a very uncomfortable position because you're surrounded by these people, and it's like you don't even know if they're gonna do something to you.
So my perspective on Roland Weary is a lot. I don't know. I think I just read things differently. When Billy describes Weary, he's just like kind of describing this like chubby kid that just always like smells like bacon no matter how much he washes himself. And he's this stuck-up kid that is just covered in a bunch of war stuff. He's got his weapons. He's like, oh, look at this, this right here. This punctures the wound, and you can't heal. And he just wears like all of this war gear. Like he's got scarves on covering his face, and he looks like he'd be like the most strong and brave soldier, but he's really just a boy covering his face and all this stuff. And yeah, and Roland Weary's death, he kind of says it was Billy Pilgrim. In Billy Pilgrim's death, I kind of saw how he was like trying to get back at Billy Pilgrim for not really admiring himself. Like whenever he would show him his cool like pictures or nasty.
Billy just thought that it was weird.
Yeah, he thought he was weird, and you can see that when Roland told the other soldiers to get his payback on Billy after the war.
Because they think that Billy is the reason Roland
They think,
Weary died.
yeah, but really it was just he was a weak kid in my eyes, and
He was a product of his own mistakes. Really.
he basically let himself die. All right, go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, and as Brandon was saying, Weary was described as like physically unimpressive, and to compensate for this, he would carry like a large hunting knife, and he always boasted about like his actions and his bravery and his toughness although he really wasn't. And then, throughout the novel, as he became more delusional, he became obsessed with killing Germans, and like that he wanted to be destined for greatness as a war hero. But, this was not the case, as he was a result of his own downfall.
Yeah, I mean, my perception of this character, I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Full Metal Jacket, but there's a character named Door Gunner, and he's just this aggressive, he loves war, he loves all aspects of war. I feel like this character really embodied the kind of instinctual side, like the animal side of humans, just bloodthirsty. I feel like he really wanted to prove that he was a hero.
And it really shows with like the Three Musketeers and his three friends who they thought that they were extreme heroes and thought that they were saving the world by just being themselves and killing Germans and stuff. But I mean, in reality, it's like ironic. All of them got killed, and Billy Pilgrim is still alive watching everything happen.
Right.
So yeah.
So another character I wanted to talk about was Paul Lazaro. He's responsible for Billy Pilgrim's death later on in the book, but just in the prisoner of war perspective of the story, we just get to learn that he's this revengeful just person that he thinks that revenge is the greatest thing on the planet, and he talks about how he like went through some issues with this dog that bit him, and he planted a stake, and there was like, I think it was like pieces of like metal spring.
Yeah, from a clock.
Yeah.
And he sticked it in meat and
Yeah.
then fed it to the dog, and the dog sat there, ate it,
Yeah.
and then he's sitting there
laughing.
coughing up blood,
Yep.
saying like, "Yeah, don't you like it whenever you bite on me, huh?"
Well, I
Right.
think it's very important to note that he is hurt. I mean, his friend where he died, and I think he just uses that as the outlet to justify his
Well,
killings.
yeah, but the dog thing was before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just
That's
shows
the
how,
thing.
like, how people in this war have lost their minds. Like, the things they've seen and experienced, it just drives them to a point of, like, craziness. And that shows how, like, Paul Lazaro, it shows the effect on a lot of people in that war. Like, they
Yeah.
become insanely violent, and their actions are completely unjustifiable.
Right.
he
like-
lost his moral compass.
When before he was, talking about maybe a dog or like some animal that messed with him. Now it's, you mess with me, I'm gonna kill you later on in life. He's talking to people now, and
And
he has
he's-
he does not care. Like he says he's going to shoot you. He's like, don't you worry. In 15 years,
yeah, it
I'll be
doesn't
there.
even-
So don't even trip about it right now. I'll be there later.
Exactly. Like it's not even right now. He's
Yeah.
he's talking about in 15 years he'll have somebody show up to your doorstep, shoot you in the penis, and then sit there and
And
say,
you know what's-
hey, like how you
yeah.
like your life now, and then pop a cap.
Yeah,
in
and you
his
know what's
head.
crazy is like he was not even joking. Like
No,
it-
he was being
happened.
very
His
his
serious.
penis, someone's penis was shot. Yes.
Okay.
All right, so with
about Derby or no?
yeah, well, I mean, Edgar Derby, he isn't really someone that has an impact on the plot of the story as a whole, but he's someone that gets brought up a decent amount. And who he is as a person, Edgar Derby is like he's a older age.
right?
I mean, yeah, he was a teacher
Yeah, I would
before
say
the
he's
war.
just like an ordinary guy.
He's an ordinary guy, really, but he becomes the captain of the group of the American soldiers as a whole. And then at the end of the story, he gets caught trying to steal. It was like a pan or something, and he just gets executed from a firing squad.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's another symbol of
It was a teapot.
yeah, a teapot, and he's another symbol of like how just insane and absurd war is. Like, why are you gonna kill someone like
an
that over a
innocent
teapot?
man who
I
was
forget,
mature and,
who was-
very well stable in a sense.
Who was the man that he like kind of scowled the Germans when they were being like taken as prisoners, and then the German actually understood it, and he kind of beat him right there, and then he goes, "Why me?" And the German's just like, "Why not any of you?" Like,
Oh, yeah.
they don't. Those German soldiers like they don't
That's
care
the mind-
about
that's-
them.
That's
That's
really
the
the
mindset
mindset
that they had.
of war.
Yeah.
You know?
It shows like
They're animals.
it shows how senseless people are in war for something such as little as stealing that pot.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
because.
And Van Gogh clearly uses Derby's death as a prime example of the violence that occurred during the war, and this scene really gives us a perspective on the craziness and the unorganized violence that happens.
So tying in just like the selfishness and greed, and trying to show power over everyone in the from the German soldiers to the prisoners of war, I think that gets highlighted by the American Nazi Campbell, who he went over to the Nazis, and he was just kind of talking about how Americans are so like, what are they, just like selfish, like
Yeah.
they don't want to give respect, like they're
They
so
don't-
self like they just care about themselves.
Exactly, they don't think of themselves as like a
And
brotherhood.
like if there's a leader, they won't all team up and be with this leader and respect this leader. And I think the Nazis are kind of like showing, I mean, not, they're already like kind of done with them. Like they're like, you're soldiers, we don't care about you guys. But in a way, they're showing them that all these Nazis together are like, I know it's bad, but they're very powerful, and they can do a lot of damage together. But at the same time, the American soldiers don't even care. They're self-pitying. They're not coming together to say, oh, how can we stop them? They're just self-pitying. They care about themselves. And yeah, I mean, Campbell highlighted that really well. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think Howard Campbell, he also represents kind of like the good and evil aspect of this book, because he was a good man. I mean, you could say, right? He was friendly with the United States, and he saw corruption, which, many people see today. And he was just pushed off of the edge, and he was just flooded with guilt. And sometimes that's a recipe for disaster.
All right, so now we can go into Tralfamadore and the Tralfamadorians, who are arguably like the most important part of the book.
Yeah, I would say so.
So Tralfamadore is a planet that Billy supposedly got kidnapped to by aliens, the Tralfamadorians. And these people, they see time as a non-linear aspect. It's like humans on Earth, we see time as something that goes on. The past is the past. You can't go back to it. The past is over.
Right.
And when you look at it as it's all around us. It's not
You're
back
living in
or
simultaneous.
Yeah, everything
Exactly.
everything happens at once. Everything just is. There's no past, present, or future. Everything has been determined and planned out, and every event that you've lived and will live has already happened.
Exactly.
That's
And
crazy.
Yeah, actually, there was a point where, he signs his contract and Billy Pilgrim's writing his books, and there's a point where he's talking to some of his followers and saying, in a couple moments from now, I'm going to be shot dead, and, everyone kind of gets scared, and he's just like,
he starts panicking.
yeah, and he's just like, but that's okay, because if you really have been listening and, following up with me, you know that this does not matter at all. Like,
Yeah.
like, what do they always say?
So it goes.
So it goes.
Well, so it goes, but also you will
can spend a time with him somewhere else.
Yeah, just because I'm not here right now doesn't mean that I wasn't here in the past or I'm not going to be there in the future, because at some point you have to die.
Exactly.
And at some point you're going to be deceased, so therefore we will meet again, and it's okay in a sense. Not being scared of death is a very important thing sometimes.
Yeah, and along with the time aspect that they show, the Tralfamadorians also, they portray the peaceful and advanced civilization that the characters are not a part of, and they tell them that we still have war and we still have all these bad things, but we just know how to live with it
And look away in a sense, and almost mask it, cover up the bad.
They're just
and
not living in that moment.
Yeah,
there's
focus-
no point to dwell.
Exactly.
Harp on this one little thing that's happening when you look away in a couple moments from this part, you'll be living at some point in the future or the past that you.
Yeah,
already
you
know.
just focus on the good compared to the bad.
I think personally that it kind of demeaned the aspect of free will in our nature and more of fate and destiny. And I think that was very interesting because it just kind of shows that humans' perceptions are always going to be limited in some sense.
Yeah.
Exactly. Moving on to that, the concept of free will in this book is heavily discussed, and it shows that in Billy's mindset, what he saw in Dresden is just so horrific and unexplainable. He can't really cope with it, and I feel like the aspect of Tralfamadore and the concept of free will is something to help him cope. That all of us, we're determined to die. Our deaths are already planned out, and there's no avoiding it. So once you die, once your death comes, then you should just be fine with it. Accept your fate, and it is what it is. It happens, and then when people die, the Tralfamadorians especially, they don't think of it as you die and you're gone. When you die, according to the Tralfamadorian philosophy, so it goes. You're in a bad place at a particular moment in time, but then you will be somewhere else. You're never really dead. You're just somewhere else.
Yeah. There's a part in the book where Billy Pilgrim's saying how he really admires the way that I don't even know how to say it. How they Tralfamadorians, how they're able to get past chronological order and get to see everything as a whole. And he likes to say how he can just look away from the bad things, and he just admires all the great things that are in his life, and he can just look at those all the time.
And I really think that's why he comes back to the Earth after taking that trip, and he's all extremely scrambled brain because it really just messed up his whole programming in the way you may think of life, being in a capsule with a porn star and
the Montana.
being displayed in front of somebody, like that. And it just shows a lot more philosophy in that whole world, that there is more to life than just the surface level. He really dove deep into it. And
also I want to say that part kind of, it doesn't really, I don't know, it doesn't show it, but it's just highlighting the anti-war, as in the fact that it's just like us. There's a zoo. There's people that have sold out tickets to watch these brand new blah 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 blah, and they have wars. Yeah. They have this. They have bad things, but There's no chaos at all. It's just they're all enjoying.
It's some sort of, I'd say, intergalactic coping mechanism.
It's like a utopia.
You know?
Yeah, and where did like this even come from? I know it's like a coping
Tralfamadore?
method
Yeah.
of his head, but
That's my thing.
this
I think
isn't like a real thing.
Do you guys think it's?
I mean, that's what the author leaves it to be. You don't really know, but I mean, I think the safest bet to assume is that it's a coping mechanism for Billy, that because like when you're in a war and you're in an event where over 100,000 people die in one day and a city is completely destroyed and burned to the ground.
I just think it's a genius way to be anti-war.
I mean,
without even saying.
Yeah,
you can't really cope with it. There's no what explanation is
It's
there
ridiculous if you think
seeing
about
like all these dead bodies everywhere. So I feel like Tralfamadore, especially the concept of like everything just is. There's no avoiding what happens
it's
to
all
you.
inevitable.
It's
They're
all
like,
inevitable.
Let me open up your third eye and take you on a trip.
and it's like a dream.
Yeah,
world that
actually,
wanna
they
live
see
in.
four dimensions.
They have the 4-dimensional.
So like
The
the humans are
Tralfamadorians.
actually a little different looking to them.
and especially
of course.
the
They-
Tralfamadorians.
They communicate with whistles and
Oh yeah,
sounds.
they like this.
they're-
Yeah.
So and how detailed he explains it as just being a concept, like a coping method in his head. You can really understand.
But
how
he doesn't. He doesn't.
traumatic
He never
it is.
He
says
doesn't
this in
say
his
it's a
head,
coping.
though.
He
That's
genuinely
Yeah, yeah,
believes
yeah.
that he was kidnapped.
Like
and
his
Tralfamadore.
daughter,
Yeah.
his daughter explains to him like, "You're crazy. You're telling these kids like you're supposed to be just testing their eyes. You're telling them that they're gonna go see their dead father that died in war later in life. So hey, isn't that comforting? No,
Exactly.
you cannot be telling children that. But in his eyes, he's just like, daughter, one day you're gonna see that like it's all so
Exactly.
it goes.
You're
Like,
just-
you're gonna get to see everything.
And that "so it goes" part, that's influenced off of the Tralfamadorian. So like Billy says "so it goes" whenever someone dies. There's a particular
Anything
and
dies.
whenever anything or
He could be
someone
talking
dies.
about some, like,
They were-
water that
yeah.
was used to oil a machine.
They were the night before the bombing. They were in like the underground, and
They were in the slaughterhouse.
they went to Slaughterhouse, yeah. And then they were talking about, Billy was saying that night no one died, but the next day over 100,000 people died. So it goes.
Yep.
So it just shows that like, as a way to cope with the tragedy, it's just things they just are what they are. I mean,
And
no,
you can't necessarily help it.
exactly.
But
You
you
just
can
can't-
turn the page and look at the best thing.
Yeah.
I think Billy. I
You
think
know.
Billy thinks at this point that like there is still hope, like because there is more. A lot of people think in this world that you live and you die and then that's it, and he thinks he kind of screwed it up already because of all the trauma he has in his head. But all the situations with the aliens, he has hope that when he dies there will be more, and so it will go.
And he has people like his family who think he's absolutely crazy, but
Yep.
he also has this group of followers who also implement this mindset. And just, if this is a way for them to live a more peaceful life, then
So be it.
Like,
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask, like, what's your guys' opinions on, the little bird? It's just
The
written
pooty
as
wheat?
pooty wheat. It's just in the beginning, kind of like a couple times in the middle, and then at the end. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, so the Pooty Week part, especially it's literally the last line of
Yep.
the book. And to me, it's just like how like in war there's no explanation for things. And this Pooty Week part, when it was at the end of the book, when it's outside of Billy's hospital window, it just says Pooty Wheat, and then there's nothing after that. So
Yeah.
I think of it as like, when you're in war, there's no answer for what really goes on after a massacre. Like, there's no explanation of words that you could possibly say
So
to
you just-
justify anything.
And I kind of thought it was just going to be a cliche, like, oh, the ending of the book is definitely going to say "so it goes," but that kind of surprised me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really represents just like the circle of life, like especially in the morning whenever you wake up, most of the time you hear like birds and stuff. And, it's like him saying Pooty Wee, like that's the representation of a bird. Saying it at both the beginning and the ending of the book really creates a sense of the circle of life, and that, things are much more than just what's on the surface. And, back to the Tralfamadorian stuff, like it really just connects. And yeah, it just really allows for everything to be cohesive and built together in a sense.
All right, so one thing that I feel makes this book really unique, as well as the style and the structure of how Vonnegut wrote the book. So you guys have any opinions?
I can add on the style. I just think the overall style was there's just like no sugarcoating whatsoever. He really will lay it all out, every detail. He'll use vulgar words to describe. Like I remember when he was describing this injured foot. I don't quite remember the word.
Weird. Yeah.
What did he
Like
say?
mangled.
Yeah.
How he got gangrene. All
Yeah,
over
and
it. Yeah.
and there's just
nasty.
Yeah, I think the style, tone, and figurative language are very straightforward almost. You know, it doesn't sugarcoat anything, and that really is relatable to the aspect of horror. I mean, it is horrific, so why sugarcoat the way you talked about
but
it?
I think the whole reason is like he's not sugarcoating it is because, you know how it was talked about in the beginning of the book, how, oh, you better not write this book like it's a freaking hero story. Like, you guys were babies and you suffered in war and you were babies. You're not no hero. You're not no freaking, I forget the actors. He said she said like famous actor's name.
Oh, here's wife.
Yeah. And she's just like, you're not a hero. Like, you were babies and you suffered, and you better make it. Yeah.
correctly.
And that's why he kind of just does not hide anything that
I
he saw.
mean, this book is at the first page. It says dedicated to O'Hare's wife.
Right. Yeah. So.
And it really just shows a good point in the whole structure of the whole entire book. Like, it all just comes together as one piece of literature and truly makes sense to every single aspect in the whole book. Like, it's very important. Yeah.
And also like the specific structure of how Vonnegut writes. The paragraphs are they're short, they're concise, they're like straight to the point.
Yeah, and like the book is like, what is it, like almost 270, maybe 300 pages. But for some reason, it's a very like kind of quick read. You know, it doesn't take you a very long time as you'd think. Like maybe some Harry Potter book has 300 pages. Yeah. It's just very like quick sentences, and you get through it really quick, and you don't even notice how fast the time goes by.
And I feel like how he adds on to that, the language, the type of diction that he uses, sometimes it can be like almost satirical and humorous. It kind of makes everything seem lighthearted, but at the end of the day, like, it's war, and there's just no explaining it. So I feel like almost that satirical language helps Billy cope with the experiences and what he saw.
I agree.
what, satirical as in there was some humor in it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like when I had some Audible, some reading, and when I was listening to the book, like I low key, popped out a couple laughs. It was pretty funny. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
And it was some points where I probably shouldn't be laughing, but just the way he flat out puts it on the table and just says it, you just have to laugh.
Yeah, and this was like the first movie or book that I've seen that portrayed war in this way. I'm used to, Saving Private Ryan and heroes. It's broken, bro.
All right, so another symbol that I think is very important to the book was the slaughterhouse itself. So the slaughterhouse is the shelter that Billy and his group of American prisoners, POWs, were in during the war, and it's beneath the ground. And the slaughterhouse is like a slaughterhouse for pigs originally, but then the POWs take shelter in it while the bombing is happening.
Yeah.
And I just feel like it's a symbol of Dresden itself was a slaughterhouse. So many people died and the destruction that occurred. And it's kind of ironic how while this is happening, they're taking shelter within an actual slaughterhouse where deaths of the animals are.
And also, I noticed that when they were traveling at any time outside of the slaughterhouse with the Germans made sure they all understood how to say Slaughterhouse 5 in the German language. And yeah, it was just so whenever they'd be out and roaming or whatever, not necessarily roaming, but just not with their prisoners of war grouped up in there, if they were ever asked hey, where are you stationed, where's your address, they'd know how to say Slaughterhouse 5. And it's just kind of messed up how they're just saying, oh yeah, I'm in Slaughterhouse 5. That's just messed up.
All right, so we've touched on most points here. We can start wrapping it up. So let's just how do you guys think of the book as a whole?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the book. This was the first piece of literature and movie that portrayed war in this way to me. like I'm used to heroic movies like Saving Private Ryan who like glorify war, but this book really showed what it truly is.
I feel as if this book portrays a unique style of writing that I've never heard or like seen before, and it's all just very cohesive and it all makes sense. And it's a phenomenal piece of literature that seems extremely complex and all over the place, yet so little and straight to the point as to what the author was truly trying to say. And for that, I mean, it was a phenomenal book and a great read.
Yeah, I think overall it really showed the struggles and harsh realities of what war is. And I think the whole time travel aspect of it really gave Billy a sense of peace of mind. And I think a lot of people can take away from that. And that was kind of like that was my favorite part when the aliens abducted him. And he kind of just learned that when he dies, that isn't it. And there is more.
So yeah, I just want to say, Zane, good recommendation. And I'm not gonna lie, when I first started this book, I was just like, what am I reading? Like, what did this guy pick?
We all were.
Yeah, and then I kind of looked up like what the heck this thing's all about, and I'm like, okay, I just got to keep going. And yeah, I soon found out that like it was like a really good read. It was funny. It was like mysterious with the aliens.
As well.
It was like, yeah, it was just a bunch of stuff going on. It was like, I don't know, it was like very stimulating, and it was a good read at the end, and yeah, I liked it.
All right, and yeah, just summing up on that, I mean, this is also like my first time reading anything that shows war in this point of view, you know. As Thomas said earlier, a lot of movies and books, they glorify war and show it in like a victorious, heroic way, but this book, it showed all the bad sides of the war and how it doesn't make sense, it doesn't create peace, and it's just all chaos. All right, thank you.